We are reaching to the final session of this week. We had a very long week with different sessions on space traffic management, space debris, space resources, also on the regional and national approaches on space sustainability. And today, before, we were just listening to youth on these matters. And now we are in this panel on the civil society organizations. It has been an incredible week with the participation of all the speakers. We are gathering information as we did in the technical symposium last November, now with this policy symposium, towards to the meeting that we're going to have in Lisbon on the 14th and 15th of May. Right today, right after this session, we are going to open the registrations for the meeting in May, for the in-person meeting. And also we will release the draft agenda for those 2 days. This is has been a very important symposium, not just this one, the policy one, but also the technical one, where you could collect inputs from speakers from all around the world in their different positions, and that will help us to have the best event then later on in May, and come with the conclusions document after the May event. We are working together with the nose in the roads of the Summit of the Future. And for today's session, I want to thank all the panelists for your time to joining us and to collaborate and participate in this endeavor that is not just for the member states, but for all of us. And this is why we also have here the civil society organizations to participate in this mission for all. And I would like to introduce the moderator so we can start very quickly with the panel. And so the moderation today will be done by Markus Woltran. He's the program officer in the in the office of the director of the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. He supports the director in the diverse strategic and policy relevant areas, including the strategic directions and operational priorities, as well as the external relations and interagency affairs. He supports the key activities and leads the organization of international conferences, workshops, expert meetings, and symposium. Markus holds a master's degree on political science, and it is with very much pleasure. And Markus, I also want to thank for all of your support supporting us in the organization of these virtual meetings and also in the conference later in Lisbon. So Markus, I'll give you now the floor, and thank you very much to all.
Thank you very much, Hugo. Thanks a lot for the kind opening remarks. Thanks a lot for the invitation. First of all, thank you. It's the last session. You thanked already all the speakers, but I wish to sincerely thank the Portuguese Space Agency for an amazing week. It was really interesting. We just concluded, as you mentioned, a youth session, which was very energetic, and now we see I would say the biggest session of the entire week with now 9 speakers. So let me really dive right into it. Given that we have a tight timing and amazing speakers with us. So before I hand over to the speakers for the introductory remarks and some opening statements, which will be around 5 minutes, I would like to paint a bit the background on the importance of the civil society being engaged in this entire process. And I really would like to highlight that since the very beginning, since the very start of the discussion of the Summit of the Future, which was actually initiated with the 75th anniversary declaration by member states, we have seen a reference to not only partnerships, but also to civil society organizations and the broader stakeholder engagement. So when we go back to the declaration, which was issued by the member states on celebration of the 75th anniversary, we see a paragraph highlighting that there's a boost of partnerships, that today's challenge require cooperation, not only across borders, but across the whole society. So that's really the anchor overall for the importance of the civil society with the starting point. We then moved forward to the common agenda. So the Secretary General replied to this declaration with the common agenda, and in there we see it gradually growing, saying that that there's now is the time for stronger and more networked and inclusive multilateral system anchored within the United Nations. Effective multilateralism depends on effective United Nations, and he specifically mentioned in one of the elements the multi-stakeholder dialogue on outer space, as well as the Global Digital Compact. And we convene today as one important part of this multi-stakeholder dialogues on outer space in preparation of the Summit of the Future, where in the common agenda, the Secretary General has highlighted the possibility of hosting such a summit. So now we are advancing a bit further, and in this common agenda, we have one part which is described as peaceful, secure, and sustainable use of outer space, including, again, through a multi-stakeholder dialogue on outer space. And to that end, consideration should be given to this dialogue and bringing together governments, but as well as other leading space actors. And last but not least, I think it's important to mention that this then developed obviously into the policy brief. So the Secretary General has developed his thoughts on outer space, the current status, but also provided some recommendations. And in this policy brief, again, member states are invited to consider how to facilitate the participation of commercial actors, civil society representative, and other relevant actors in the work of the outer space related in the government processes. So this process really is, so the engagement of a broad multi-stakeholder dialogue is really anchored since the very beginning. And I would say it really went so far as to the modalities resolution, which actually then through the General Assembly has agreed on the preparation of the Summit of the Future, where the resolution which was adopted in September 2022 encourages major groups and other stakeholders to participate and engage in the preparatory process of the summit. And that's where we are today. So we are in the preparatory process of the summit. We are specifically on the outer space track, on the outer space multi-stakeholder dialogue, on the outer space track of the Summit of the Future. And it is a pleasure to invite 9 distinguished representatives from all over the world. We really have a high-level representation from Australia to the West Coast. So it's really we are spanning the broadest time zones, I think, throughout the week. And I would quickly introduce each of the speakers and then follow up with a quick follow-up question. So first of all, we have with us Brent Sherwood. He's Space Domain Lead for AIAA, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, the world's largest organization dedicated to aerospace profession. Then we have with us Pascale Ehrenfreund, who is the President of the Committee on Space Research and Research Professor of Space Policy and International Affairs at the Space Policy Institute, George Washington University. She's also co-chair of the Global Future Council on Space for the World Economic Forum. We have Dr. Anil Kumar with us, who is chair of Interagency Space Debris Coordination Group, an outstanding scientist of the Indian Space Research Organization, associate director of ISRO's Telemetry Tracking and Command Network. We have Piero Benvenuti, Emeritus University of Padova and interim general secretary of the International Astronomical Union. We have Mr. Nicolas Peter. He's the president of the International Space University, which is based in Strasbourg, France. We have Anna Ashford, who is a lawyer and managing director of the Karman project, a global non-profit foundation which brings together public and private space sector leaders to facilitate multilateral trust building and strategic dialogue on the future of outer space. We have Antonino Salmeri, who is a space lawyer specialized in the governance of space resource and lunar activities. And he's also the director of the Lunar Policy and co-chair of the Space Generation Advisory Council. Giuseppe Reibaldi is a space manager and space policy advisor, co-founder and president of the Moon Village Association, a global multi-stakeholder NGO fostering cooperation for the peaceful and sustainable lunar activities. And last but not least, Krystal Azelton, who is the director of Space Applications Program at the Secure World Foundation, who has over 18 years of international domestic space, public policy and management experience. So I really ran through the presentation. I'm really sorry. I really would like to give you the time to engage and discuss with us. And to kick off the 5-minute introductory statement, I would like to ask you for putting your statement in the light of the UN Secretary General's policy brief and the upcoming Summit of the Future. How can civil society organizations contribute to fostering a peaceful and secure space environment? Please share your perspectives on the roles and responsibilities of your organizations, of the importance of the civil society to embrace in promoting space sustainability. And also, we have focused on a various set of topics, specifically on space traffic management, space debris coordination, and equitable access to space resources. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to Brent Sherwood, handing over. And if you might wonder, regarding the sequence, we have agreed among us that we are using the sequence as per alphabetic order of the organizations. So, Brent, The floor is yours.
Thank you, Markus. Thanks for the opportunity to participate today. As Markus said, I'm Brent Sherwood, Space Domain Lead for AIAA. With respect to civil society contributions, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics is the world's largest organization of aerospace professionals with 30,000 members. I have brief remarks about the three fundamental topics, which I'll get right to. On the subject of space traffic coordination, we see that the number of simultaneously operating systems orbiting Earth is rapidly increasing, which makes it mission critical to all operators to have accurate orbital elements of all orbiting objects, along with comprehensive and timely conjunction analysis. AIAA recommends a multinational agreement to make and keep orbital space sustainable for all users. In the US, government responsibility for issuing official conjunction analyses and alerts is transitioning from the Department of Defense to the Department of Commerce, particularly the Office of Space Commercialization. AIAA recommends that domestically that schedule for accomplishing the transition be expedited. And in AIAA, we have a task force for space traffic coordination, which coordinates expertise within AIAA to provide assistance for that purpose. On the subject of space debris, orbital debris poses an urgent multinational challenge because it threatens the sustainable use of low Earth orbits by all users. Yet, so far, prevention is not universally practiced, and remediation is not practical. Debris prevention by all space launch and satellite operators is essential. AIAA advocates a binding multinational ban on destructive anti-satellite operations and binding multinational design and operation standards that prevent launch vehicle stages and defunct satellites from causing more debris. With respect to remediation, it's essential also, but it will require research, demonstration, and joint commitment. Implementation of remediation must be technically feasible, economically workable, and politically acceptable to the multinational community. AIAA advocates the active cleanup of existing legacy debris whose orbital lifetime exceeds 10 years. And that remediation must not increase orbital debris or hazards to people and property on Earth or environmental damage to the upper atmosphere. And the costs should be equitably borne by parties whose actions have caused and continue to cause debris risk. AIAA supports an effective, comprehensive, binding multinational policy that includes prevention, detection, tracking, modeling, and remediation. And our Space Traffic Coordination Task Force stands ready to support for that purpose as well. Finally, on the subject of space resources, we see that there are three types of resources that space offers. Number one is special locations. For example, sun-synchronous orbits, the geobelt, Lagrange points, and the lunar poles. Number two is solar energy, for example, for space-based solar power for Earth. And number three is planetary materials, for example, lunar oxygen and volatiles or asteroidal compounds and elements. All are, in a practical sense, limited. For special locations, the top priority is deconfliction. We need to quantify the operational constraints on use by multiple actors in those locations because they're all unique, and then build on existing ITU and Article 6 policies to adjudicate equitable allocation of limited orbital locations in particular. For the other two, solar energy and planetary materials, AIAA holds that they are speculative fields and governing policies would be premature. The technical feasibility and economic viability of both of them, solar energy for Earth and planetary materials extraction, are unproven and remain so. Therefore, it's impractical and unnecessary to develop or codify space resource policies for them. For solar energy, the timely priority is scalable economic implementation, starting with safe, high-power wireless transmission from space to ground through the atmosphere. For planetary materials, the timely priority is gaining fundamental knowledge that we do not yet have. We have to characterize resource abundance, distribution, origin, replenishment mechanisms, and planetary protection factors, and then demonstrate end-to-end techniques for accessibility, extraction, and use. Much needs to be learned before regulation is justified in this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brent. Thanks a lot for diving right into concrete recommendations against the topics. Thank you very much. Handing over next to Ms. Ehrenfreund for your introductory remarks. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and all the distinguished delegates. It's a privilege for the Committee on Space Research, COSPAR, to contribute to this symposium. And 2 sentences to introduce COSPAR. Founded in 1958, COSPAR stands as the foremost global entity promoting international cooperation in space research. So COSPAR comprises 46 national scientific institutions and 13 international scientific unions, and drawing on the expertise of 13,000 space scientists globally. And through the committee's scientific assembly, panels, roadmaps, and publication, COSPAR actively fosters the development of sustainable space exploration. So the strength of COSPAR is really also to provide scientific findings and innovative solutions. So COSPAR has a long-standing partnership with the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space, contributing through various commissions and panels. And for more than 60 years, COSPAR's panel on planetary protection has upheld the principles of the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 and advising on the avoidance of biological contamination of celestial bodies. And in the following, I want to discuss the critical topics of this symposium: space debris, space resources, and space traffic management, like before. So our panel on potentially environmentally detrimental activities in space, in collaboration also with UNOOSA, diligently addresses the pressing issues of space debris. And this includes research on the upper atmosphere contamination by disintegrating space objects, and also the development of policies to manage cislunar space debris. So regarding space debris mitigation, deorbiting obviously is recognized as the standard procedure. However, the rapid growth in satellite constellations, we see an unprecedented increase in both the number and re-entering objects and their mass, and we discussed it already before. Changes in satellite materials also alters their interaction with the atmosphere upon re-entry, disperses artificial debris across the Earth's surface, and potentially harms the upper atmosphere through chemical reactions during burnup. So these are all the scientific topics which COSPAR is studying and contributing. And COSPAR's Commission B on the space studies of the solar system and the panel on space exploration really emphasize the importance of planetary environmental stewardship, which includes the utilization of space resources and planetary protection measures on celestial bodies like Moon, Mars, and asteroids. And this was the topic of the week. There is an urgent requirement for guidelines and regulatory frameworks, of course, also in the cislunar regions. And as a first step, the cislunar region should be somehow recommended to be a protected region. And this is required to harmonize economic interests with the imperative to safeguard the scientific integrity of space exploration. So COSPAR members engage also in further critical research into end-of-life strategies and preservation of scientific sites that align with lunar planetary protection and stewardship. And by closing, I want to say that COSPAR places great emphasis on capacity building, striving to support space research within countries developing their space program. And in particular the next generation, as has been discussed this morning. Furthermore, COSPAR has formed a committee on industrial relations, which now includes 18 premier space companies, to foster this multi-stakeholder dialogue, which we just discussed before. And the COSPAR panel on space weather plays a critical role in analyzing the impact of space weather within an international context, while we have also dedicated task groups which are pioneering the establishment of a constellation of small satellites in order to monitor the ionospheres, improving our ability to forecast space weather events, but also for the study of the upper atmosphere or cislunar space. So in closing, I want to say that COSPAR efforts to promote knowledge exchange, to foster invitation, to build also new partnerships and really provide new scientific findings stands as a testament to the committee's commitment to address space research in all domains, including space debris and overall space sustainability. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ehrenfreund. Thanks a lot for your contribution. I think it's already clear after the first intervention the importance of the civil society to be engaged in the discussions, from capacity building to networking to providing different and other approaches to the subject at hand. So thank you very much for the intervention. The next on the speakers list is Dr. Anil Kumar. Over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, distinguished and honorable delegates. On behalf of Interagency Space Debris Coordination Committee, IADC, I will be briefing about the activities spanning through last 30 years. Thanks to UNOOSA and Portugal Space Agency for providing this platform to highlight the activities of IADC and all the contributions of IADC for the long-term sustainability of outer space. The Interagency Space Debris Coordination Committee was formed in 1993 as an international forum dedicated to addressing the issues related to space debris in Earth orbit. It comprises national and international space agencies for the worldwide technical, scientific coordination of activities and providing technical recommendations. At present, IADC has 13 member agencies, which include 12 national agencies from Italy, France, Canada, China, Germany, India, Japan, Russia, South Korea, United Kingdom, US, and Ukraine, and the European Space Agency. As all of us know that these UN space debris mitigation guidelines are derived out of IADC mitigation guidelines, which was formulated in the beginning of 2000. IADC consists of steering group and 4 specified working groups dealing with measurements in WG1, environment and database in WG2, protection in WG3, and mitigation in WG4. The primary purpose of the IADC are exchanging information on space debris research activities among the members, facilitating opportunities for cooperation in space debris research, reviewing the progress of ongoing cooperative activities, most importantly, identifying space debris mitigation options to keep space with transformative evolution of the outer space environment. In fact, IADC is not a regulatory organization. It provides technical recommendations to the international space community. National or international space and state organizations that carry out space activities through planning, designing, launching, or operating space objects are eligible for membership. The main criteria is that the members should actively undertake space debris research activities and contribute to the increased understanding of the space debris issues for the preservation of the orbital environment and the space ecosystem. IADC generally it held in-person annual meetings, which where more than 100 technical experts from member agencies participate to review the progress and advance of the IADC action items which are taken up. Last year, ESA hosted the 41st annual meeting at ESOC ESA, Darmstadt, Germany. This year, ISRO will be hosting the next annual meet in Bengaluru, India during April 16 to 19, 2024. IADC conducts annual object re-entry prediction, risk object re-entry prediction campaigns for data sharing exercises and improvement of the prediction techniques. It is also aimed to prepare for and respond for the high-risk re-entry events. As of now, 30 re-entry campaigns have been conducted since 1998. IADC releases study reports as core products in its website through technical analysis, critical reviews, and deliberations. During 2022 and 23, IADC released 8 CRPs. Some of the recent IADC core products are updated IADC mitigation guidelines, corresponding support documents, very relevant statement on large constellations, IADC protection manual that outlines the post-mission disposal of objects in highly inclined geosynchronous orbit, attitude motion characterization for LEO objects using different observation techniques, standard environmental index, and recommendations for the optical observation data exchange format. IADC report on status of the space debris environment, second issue of the report, which provides an assessment of the current status of space debris environment and the evolution of the environment, are released, which gives an assessment of space ecosystem after complying partially with the UN-accepted space debris mitigation guidelines. Additional tasks are also taken up, such as surveying decision criteria for collision avoidance maneuvers, formulating space debris mitigation measures for lunar orbits, and bringing out a report on the benefits and risk associated with the different disposal options for objects in medium Earth orbit, MEO. In a nutshell, IADC has established itself as the internationally recognized technical authority on space debris. IADC participates in and contributes to the UN space debris activities via Scientific and Technical Subcommittee of UN COPIUS. It will continue to advance the knowledge of space debris and to develop environment management strategies to preserve the near-Earth space for future generations. A workshop on space debris concerns and mitigation strategies was organized on January 30 in Vienna as a side event during the STAC meeting. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. So we have opened up with 2 organizations being active in a very broad topic and in different fields, and now AIADC has presented on a very specific topic on space debris. So thank you very much for focusing or for condensing the lens towards a very specific topic, also being referenced in the policy briefs. So the next speaker on the list, also more on a very specific topic, is Piero Benvenuto. Over to you, Benvenuti. Sorry.
Thank you, Markus. So as you presented me, I am currently the interim General Secretary of the International Astronomical Union. And I just remind you that the IAU was founded more than 100 years ago, and today represents more than 13,000 professional astronomers from about 80 countries. And its mission is to foster and protect the science of astronomy by international collaboration. Now, we'd all agree that space technology has been instrumental for the progress of astronomy and cosmology in the last 60 years, giving access to the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Therefore, it is somehow ironical that today the same space technology is seriously threatening both astronomy and cosmology. What happened? What is the root of the issue? The new space economy, for which the only objective is the financial profit, has become the new space actor, and with its hyperactivity, it is substituting and even outclassing the national and international space agencies. Now, we can interpret this as a positive and inevitable progress, but the speed by which it is happening risks to take it out of control. And the most evident example of such an uncontrolled evolution is the deployment in low Earth orbit of the large satellite constellations. Undoubtedly, they provide worldwide connectivity, but the price to be paid is very high, and it was not adequately considered when the constellations were designed. The very large number of satellites that for a good fraction of the night are illuminated by the sun at any time transmit intentionally microwaves and unintentionally electromagnetic noise toward the Earth have a serious negative impact on astronomy and on the vision of the night sky. The IAU together with other astronomical institutions and a number of supporting delegations, has been raising the issue in the UN COPUOS, and together we achieved consensus to continue the discussion in a dedicated agenda item of the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee for the next 5 years. In addition, the IAU Center for the Protection of the Dark and Quiet Sky, or CPS, is actively discussing with the satellite companies and all the stakeholders the implementation of viable mitigating measures. And the CPS has just released yesterday a paper entitled Call to Protect the Dark and Quiet Sky from Harmful Interference by Satellite Constellations, that states its recommendation for the mitigation of satellite constellation impact on astronomy. The document is the culmination of 18 months of work by a multidisciplinary group of experts, including astronomers, industry representatives, and policy advisors, and represent the view of the IAU Center on what steps should now be taken to address the issue. In a nutshell, we demand that the satellites are made less bright, that their real-time accurate position is made publicly available, and that the direct microwave emission is deviated away when the satellites are over the radio quiet zones defined around the major radioastronomical facilities. While these actions, both at the UN legislative level and at the practical voluntary level, may hopefully achieve an acceptable compromise between the space technological progress and the protection of science, I believe that in view of the summit of the future, what is happening to astronomy should be considered a lesson to be learned and a case study for the future. Space, as immense as it may appear, is a delicate part of our environment, and as such must be justly protected. The problem that is affecting astronomy today was caused by a hastily process that did not give time neither to the constellation designer, nor to the astronomer, nor to the policymakers to evaluate all the consequences and to adequately control them. In other words, we should learn how to prevent potential damages in advance rather than running after the late solutions. We already polluted the ocean to the point of no return. Let's avoid to do the same with space. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I think it's great that we have moved from the very broad approach to a very specific topic. We have heard about the long-standing engagements within from the civil society engagements with the Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space. We have heard a recent example of the excesses of the importance of the contribution of the civil society organizations within the processes, and there is a long-standing cooperation with all of the entities presented so far. So we have broadened it up, we have narrowed down, and now I would say we are broadening up again, more on the efforts of education. And I would like to hand over to Mr. Nicolas Peter. Over to you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening wherever you are on the globe. Thank you for the UNOOSA and Portugal Space for having ISU present today. I know we already been discussed about ISU in the previous session, but I would like to give you some words on ISU to start my opening remarks. Since 1987 and since 30 years, we are based in Strasbourg, France, and ISU has been at the nexus of interdisciplinary collaboration and a major contributor to the growing workforce needed for space. ISU gives its students and program participants an in-depth understanding of space, including issues on space sustainability, providing them a clear path for talented individuals to find their place in the space ecosystem. We provide this training to help students with diverse backgrounds to apply their talents to different types of organizations, ranging from agencies, academia, as well as companies, startups, and NGO. And I'm really proud to see some ISU alumni on this event and also be moderating and active during the week. Because ISU is the only institution dedicated entirely to space education, with more than 5,600 alumni from 112 countries. And we've gone to play a significant role in the sector thanks to the education, but also because of the philosophy that embeds, that supports our education, which is intentional, intercultural, and interdisciplinary collaboration. And that's very important because it's an analog to the sector itself. Because those are also some of the important ingredients needed to ensure a future space sustainability. Based on the 3I philosophy, we have created an array of educational programs adapted to different types of profile. We run two different types of master program, the space studies program, Southern Hemisphere Space Studies program, but also executive education. And in those programs, we touch upon topics like space debris, space resources, and space traffic management that are very important and high priority, and those are really embedded in our program. And to give you some example, for instance, we have lectures on sustainability of outer space and space operation, international and national space legal framework, space security, just to name a few. Those lectures provide the participants from different cultures with different background the same level of understanding of the basic information of those topics. And this is really important because if you want to engage in a conversation, whatever the topics, you need to have a common understanding on the issues. But also we bring people together and they work together in team projects where here participants experience real-life professional scenarios working in diverse teams to take decisions in a limited amount of times and doing multitasking. So it's a bit similar to what happened in the UN, but keeping it within an academic level and focusing on cooperation. For instance, in the last summer session program in Brazil, we had a team project entitled SSA, Space Situational Awareness and On-Orbit Collision Avoidance. This is one concrete example. We had participants in this group from Spain, Peru, India, Turkey, the Netherlands, Brazil, Ireland, United States, Hungary, Italy, Brazil, Australia, Italy, Japan, China, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Israel. So it's really, when I say like in the UN, it's really like in the UN. But we also other example of team project work on different type of topics. For instance, in the master program in 2019, they looked into incorporating sustainability in the rationales for lunar settlement, or in the past, ISRU for the Moon and Mars. But we also, besides teamwork, we also have students that do their own research. For instance, we have a student that is currently doing a research project on lunar soil mechanics. Other projects in the past included lunar settlement structural design, surface rover as logistics element, development of sustainable off-world habitat, and so on. I could name countless examples in those 3 different domains that we are discussing today. Finally, our faculty is doing some research in those domains, like me, for instance, on the impact of space debris on the space economy. This high level of object overview shows you that ISU is tackling emerging and new topics like space debris, space resources, and space traffic management on its own or in partnership, and that ISU will play its role in shaping the future of space for all, and especially through education and research component. So, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, we can therefore see that over 36 years, ISU has made a significant impact in the sector through the contribution of its alumni and through its initiative supported the multifaceted dimension of space, including space sustainability. ISU is willing to support the preparation of the upcoming Summit for the Future of September 2024, and in particular its space sustainability agenda. And we also welcome the new strategy of the office to engage more with international organizations, academia, civil society, and use more NGOs like ISU as a lever to answer the important issues of the sector we are facing today and the one we will face tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter. Thanks a lot for highlighting a UN-like educational mechanisms exemplarily, I think, for all the educational institutions all over the world focusing on different topics in outer space. So thanks a lot for the presentation. So thanks also, a quick thank you to everybody for keeping the time. It's working really nicely. Thanks a lot for that. Over to you, Ms. Hannah Ashford, for your intervention on the Karman project. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Markus. And thank you again to UNOOSA and Portugal Space for the very kind invitation. We sincerely appreciate the efforts that have been made for genuine stakeholder representation and dialogue in the lead up to the Summit of the Future. And I'm honoured to present on behalf of the Karman project alongside such esteemed colleagues here today. I must forewarn you, it is approaching 2 a.m. here in Australia. So if there is any delay in my thinking cognitive abilities, I will do my best to push through, so thanks for your patience. Today I will broaden it a little bit again, similarly to Peter, and really focus upon, Nicolas, focus upon the mechanisms for effective engagement around leveraging civil society. So perhaps before turning to the multitude of ways in which civil society organisations can and are adding value to matters of space governance, we can take a moment to reflect on where such organisations see themselves in this bigger picture of official participation. And this was well articulated last year by the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs during the Outer Space Security Conference, in noting that the purpose of involving such stakeholders is not to replace executive decision-making role that states must play in shaping the future of governance, but rather it's an opportunity to really elevate international rules, regulations, and norms to other stakeholder communities. So it's all about complementarity, and it's about feeding information, knowledge, understandings in and out of relevant fora. And in this moment of history, where we're on one hand experiencing unprecedented and wonderfully, enabling access to space, and on the other hand, seeing that the potential proliferation of global crises are now well and truly within our lifespan, it's incumbent upon those in that higher level of executive governance to really look at how to integrate non-state stakeholders, such as all of the civil society organizations represented here today, into matters of space governance. And again, it's really heartening to see that this necessity to move forward in a more systemic, multilateral engagement has been highlighted on multiple occasions, which of course Markus outlined in his opening here. So, the international space community has much to gain when it comes to broad stakeholder engagement. So firstly, of course, it comes down to knowledge, because informed dialogue will facilitate informed policy making. So the topics which have been the focus of these past days when it comes down to obviously space debris, space resources, space traffic management and coordination, these require interventions in the form of both regulations and incentives. And ultimately, we need diverse input to ensure that such policy is framed for success. Then it comes down to action. And when we look at increased awareness and transparency among non-state actors, this will really increase the ownership and responsibility and instill a sense of urgency in existing roadmaps and work streams. And non-state actors can also take steps on occasion, of course, where state actors perhaps cannot. And we can't underestimate the power of this incremental progress. And that's been something that's been spoken about in many panels in these last days, particularly when there may be a lack of political will from certain states at an executive level. That's really when civil society organizations and non-state players can come in and actually lead the way. And then lastly, it comes down to trust. So we can really greatly improve the legitimacy and effectiveness of decision-making where there have been concerted and recognizable efforts towards diverse stakeholder inclusion. And civil society organizations are particularly well placed to facilitate such efforts from the ground up. So ultimately, all of the organizations represented on this panel are engaging in very different and valuable ways. And at the Karman project, we work with a variety of diverse and curated stakeholders coming from both the public and private sector to facilitate forums for strategic dialogue and trust building. And the aim is to really increase awareness and common understandings around security, safety, and sustainability in space, whilst encouraging partnerships, joint projects, tangible commitments between people coming from different disciplines and nations. So concretely, we work with international astronauts, directors of space agencies, entrepreneurs, directors of commercial entities, researchers, artists, and other stakeholders from over 60 nations worldwide. And our intention at the Karman project is really to create safe spaces for interdisciplinary and international exchange. So we often utilize the Chatham House rule, which you may be familiar with, and we found this to be very effective effective to allow people to express themselves independently and listen. Such forums really allow room for courageous thinking and accelerated problem solving. And indeed, when you're working with both state and non-state actors in decision-making positions and with that level of responsibility, we can then ensure action and implementation. So again, that's why at the Karman Project, we really look to work with people who are at that decision-making level of their career so that they can go straight back in and implement recommendations and projects. And indeed, multiple projects have been implemented into commercial work streams, into technical and material designs, for example, into capacity building efforts and national policy roadmaps across the different topics that have been canvassed during the forum this week. So ultimately, in engaging in similar models of multi-stakeholder dialogue, we really believe that the international space community can gain very useful and critical bottom-up expert perspectives regarding technical and geopolitical threats to space operations and understanding how these can be mitigated. We can understand more about behaviors that are considered helpful or perhaps harmful. We can understand more about key priorities and so forth. And like anything, there will naturally be divergence in all of these perceptions, but that divergence in itself is very helpful for policymakers in identifying potentials for misunderstandings and escalations, particularly when it comes to space traffic management and safety and security. And indeed, among stakeholders themselves, just creating those safe spaces for such consultation is a trust-building exercise in and of itself, and it shouldn't be underestimated in terms of increasing understandings and strengthening international relationships. So I have some further comments and thoughts about the need to systemically integrate civil society organizations into more opportunities, into more UN fora, for example. At the moment, there tends to be more ad hoc involvement and opportunities available for civil society organizations, but I'm happy to leave those thoughts perhaps for discussion for the sake of time. And ultimately, we all have a vested interest in securing the peaceful and sustainable use of space and that future of space. So indeed, we at the Karman Project also confirm our readiness to support the Summit of the Future and also to support all of the civil society organizations that are present here today, because ultimately we also need to sort of, preach what we're all doing in terms of showcasing that cooperation among our organizations themselves, as well as up to higher executive governance. So I'll leave it there, but thank you so much for having me. And looking forward to discussion.
Thank you very much, Anna. I can assure you that we didn't see or hear that it's 2 a.m. in the morning in Australia. So thanks a lot for your contribution. And maybe it's also a good reminder for everybody to say that the common agenda, how it was developed and shaped, actually took part in the multilateral in a multi-stakeholder process. So there was an engagement of civil society actors. There was an engagement of civil society organization, which is proved. And thanks for the reminder about that, about the complementarity of the different actors in the bottom-up approach. And the various entry levels where you are all coming from. So thanks a lot for that. And without further ado, I would like to hand over to Antonino. Antonino, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Markus, and it's been wonderful to be here. So thank you again to UNOOSA and Portugal for having me at this discussion and having LPP at this discussion. So what is LPP? The Lunar Policy Platform is an international multi-stakeholder and expert platform working with all stakeholders to identify common ground around priorities, policies, and standards for safe and sustainable lunar development. Now, as some of you might have seen, I've extensively spoken already about space debris and STM in the previous session. So, Markus, if you'll allow me, I'm going to focus my remarks here on space resources and lunar activities, given also the focus of the organization that I have the honor to represent in this panel. Now, the Lunar Policy Platform in this particular field has issued very recently, last year, a foundational report on lunar policy priorities. It's an unprecedented document outlining common ground among 30 different stakeholders from all over the world, many of which are actually here in this call and great colleagues and partners, around 10 key issues that everyone considers to be prioritary to be addressed for safe and sustainable lunar development. Now, the work that we've done on the Lunar Policy Priorities report is not just our work. It is, in fact, a culmination of many years of discussion that started in 2019 with the Hague building blocks that were published by the Hague Space Resources Governance Working Group, that were followed later on by the Eagle governance report from the Space Generation Advisory Council, later on by the Gexler recommended framework, and later on by the Moon Dialogue's Lunar Policy Handbook. And if you look at the sequence of these contributions that have been developed by civil society, in my view, you see a red thread, which is the focus, first of all, on adaptive governance, which is a concept that was established in the Hague Working Group. And second, the idea that civil society, as Hannah already said beautifully, can provide expert inputs, right, for informed discussion. And I think over the past 5 years, we've done that in the field of space resources and lunar activities. But with the LPP, we really want to go one step further, and it is going from expert inputs to organizational alignments, to stakeholder alignment on common ground, in order to enable not only informed deliberations at the multilateral, domestic, and regional level, but also enable focused discussion. Once we agree on what we have in common and what we don't have in common, we can take that further step and enable focused governance discussion in a more effective way. And organizations like LPP are really there to promote this discussion in a safe manner. We introduced a new methodology compared again to the other groups that I mentioned before, which is about asynchronous discussions, where each of the stakeholders that we work with is interviewed separately in a way that we can dedicate time and attention to them. And then moving on to analyzing what all these stakeholders have in common, putting it together in a document, and having them agreeing or disagreeing on the document, and using that as a foundational starting point. And we believe this is the next step of civil society engagement in relation to the Summit of the Future. Civil society can really be the connecting tissue among member states, but also among other organizations within the UN system. And I think specifically related to COPUOS, we opened this week of discussion with the director of UNOOSA, stating that this is a key time for COPUOS to start tackling these issues in a concrete manner. And that's why from LPP, but I think all the organizations here, we very much welcome and support the vital work that UN COPUOS is doing in these areas, in particular, again, in space resources, the work of the working group on the legal aspects of space resource activities. And we also would very much see more involvement specifically to lunar activities with the recent proposal for an establishment of an action team on lunar activities consultation, ATLAC, that was proposed by the delegation of Romania in February at the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee. And I think that would be an important platform, again, to foster this alignment and common ground among different organizations. And looking ahead at the Summit of the Future, I think we really have to continue this multi-stakeholder discussion. The important element here is that we continue to bring stakeholders together around common priorities, common issues, and shared solutions. And to that end, we very much look forward to continue engaging at upcoming events, key upcoming events organized by Portugal and UN at the Lisbon conference that I think this symposium was preparatory for, but also the UN conference on sustainable lunar activities that will take place the day before COPUOS in June, the Secure World Foundation Summit for Space Sustainability in amazing Tokyo, and of course the Summit of the Future itself. So if we look ahead, we have a wonderful calendar that we can fill with great discussions, and if we manage to draw a red thread amongst all of them and build upon one another's effort, I think we can arrive at the Summit of the Future with a great effort in our hands and hopefully a good positive spirit for concrete discussions for multilateral solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antonino. Thanks a lot. I have to admit, who would have guessed ahead before we put together the sequence that this is such a nice sequence just by the alphabetic order. I think we have really developed the entire subject on the importance of this civil society organizations really, really nicely. We have moved from a very broad topic, very narrow topic. Again, I think the reminded everybody on the importance of the networking and the bottom-up approach. And now we are moving into something very specific, a very specific topic, lunar governance, lunar policy, which is also the bridge to the next speaker, Mr. Reibaldi. The floor is yours.
Okay, so thank you. First, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you to the UNOOSA and of course to the Portuguese Space Agency to have arranged this meeting. The Moon Village Association is being created in 2017, and we had the pleasure to launch the organization from ISU. So thank you to our ISU colleague, which hosted the launch of the MVA. Since then, the organization, that is a multi-stakeholder involving space agency, government, as well as representatives of international organizations, has about 60 countries between the different participants. And I believe ISU indeed has played a major role. And many of you have participated, some of your organization, in some of the activity. So my remark today, I'd like to mention about what the rapporteur, the moderator said, which is about what are the roles and the responsibility of organizations like ours. So I think in terms of roles, I believe we need to be complementary to what is already going on and try to fill the gap so we do not wish to repeat, obviously, what other organizations are doing better, but simply to find out what is it that is missing and really to come with very specific and concrete proposal to all the other organizations, and of course, in particular, to the United Nations. MVA is the first lunar specific organization which has been together at present as a permanent observer since 2020. And since then, we have seen a multiplication of other organizations, which of course we are very pleased because that is a strength of the importance of the lunar activity. The other aspect is what are the responsibilities. I think our organization should be seen as a platform, as they are, as well as a multiplier to reach out as many as possible organization and individual. And let us not forget the public. This is something which it was from the very beginning inside the creation of the Moon Village Association. I like now to mention a couple of examples of activity of the Moon Village Association, which are very much relevant to the topic of today. Some of them they've already mentioned, but I think we took the initiative in 2021, seeing the lack of coordination mechanism for all the mission going forward to the moon, to really make sure that we had a neutral forum of about 200 experts from all over the world. And that was the creation of the Global Expert Group on Sustainable Lunar Activity, which includes right now many organizations going from COSPAR to IU, as we will see in a moment. So the GEXLA activity, and those are very concrete activities, has been operating for 2 years. And in 2023, we published, as many of you know, the recommended framework and key elements for peaceable and sustainable lunar activity. This has been presented extensively last year to the COPOS. And the framework basically document serves as a foundation tool encouraging delegation to engage in discussion on international lunar coordination. And it aims to identify an efficient and prompt approach to address urgent needs for mitigating risk, and that is important, risk for the future lunar activity. So in 2023, GEXLA initiated its operational phase, which involves, as I said, experts from many countries, 40 countries, and includes many organizations. The primary objective of the operational phase is to assess some critical issues related with the framework. And in order to do that, GEXLA has initiated 3 working groups, which are very much specific. One is to do with the lunar environment, and this includes extensive COSPAR involvement, as well as involvement of International Astronomical Union, as well as technical coordination, which includes many of the lunar industry already involved, and then the multi-stakeholder coordination, which has been, if I can say, a little bit the seed of some of the activity which has been taking place at the UN. And so obviously we are more than pleased to have seen at the last Science and Technical Subcommittee the agreement, at least to start the process of the definition of the action team, which eventually, action team about lunar activity consultation, which eventually will lead basically to a coordination mechanism. Just to conclude, let me say that the Summit of the Future, which is what we are discussing, involves, of course, looking to the future. There is nothing more future than the moon. The moon is the next destination for humankind, is the destination which is going to motivate the young generation as well as all other issues. So we need to make sure that on the moon we are not doing as badly as we have been doing right now. And so all the three topics, which is debris mitigation, space resources, as well as traffic management, they all needs to be tackled to the moon. And so that's why there is an urgent, and we will hope to use the Summit of the Future as a boost to make sure that it's clear to everyone that for the moon-related activity, we have to do better than what we have been doing on Earth. With this, I'd like to thank you, and I stop my remark. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for the reminder. I see a bit of a parallelism. We should not be as bad with the other environments. We heard this also already from Mr. Benvenuti in the orbit. So it's a bit of a reminder, and I think that's also one of the key roles of civil society organizations, to be the pulse of the time and the pulse of the society. So in closing, I would like to hand over to Krystal, and I said it's really nicely in with regards to the sequence of speakers, because Krystal will give from her perspective. I don't know what kind of remarks, but I don't want to put up the pressure on her in terms of also more her ability from the Secure World Foundation's point of view, more on the broader subject. So over to you, Krystal.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an impressive panel, and I see a lot of themes. I actually been rewriting my remarks because several of you have actually said a lot of the things that I want to say. For anyone who is unfamiliar, Secure World Foundation is a nonprofit organization based in the US but operating globally, and we are dedicated to the secure and sustainable use of outer space for the benefit of all peoples on Earth. We work with governments, intergovernmental organizations, industry, academia, and other civil society actors to develop and promote international cooperation to achieve that secure, sustainable, and peaceful uses of outer space. As all of the previous speakers have highlighted, Our Common Agenda Space Policy Brief highlights the three of the most important challenges to achieving this mission: space traffic management, space debris, and resource activities. We have already written extensively on these topics, and I would direct the audience to our website for detailed policy statements, resources, and papers, as well as invite everyone to attend the 6th Summit for Space Sustainability to be held in Tokyo, Japan on July 11th and 12th. That's in coordination with an industry-focused event called the Space Tide Conference, also held in Tokyo that week. I'd like to focus my remarks today on another issue that has come up and was highlighted in the space policy brief, which is the need for inclusive approaches to outer space governance. As a longstanding observer to the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, as well as several other multilateral institutions, we agree strongly with the other previous speakers that there is a strong need to continue to give attention to this topic. A sustainable future in space very much depends on effective institutions that take into consideration all of the needs and concerns from across all stakeholders, not just those of state actors. And right now, there aren't very many ways for civil society and other stakeholders to participate in global space policy discussions, especially in a permanent and ongoing way. So we applaud today's effort as clearly a topic of importance. Further, we are concerned about the plethora of these discussions that are happening across a variety of locales, inside formal UN institutions and committees, in self-organized groups by states, in national policy and regulatory agencies, as well as part of private sector standards and best practices initiatives. Given how much we're all aware of the importance of space sustainability, this sort of dizzying multitude of fora is only going to continue to increase, and it's only going to continue to compound this problem, making it hard for a wide range of actors to provide substantive, useful inputs. I would also highlight that sometimes these groups can be stovepiped. We focus on what we do very specifically, and the engagement in cross-organizational information sharing isn't always as strong as we would like to see. This can result in overlapping approaches, but also gaps in proposed solutions. How does the space community navigate and optimize these separate forums in a more holistic and responsive fashion for space sustainability? And most importantly, what are the opportunities do we have to improve how these various forums engage with each other and work towards coherent goals that actually address the true breadth of voices that need to be heard on a direct, regular, and ongoing basis? In our view, the important thing to remember is that civil society can be a convener, a researcher, an analyst, and a developer of technical solutions, among many other roles, many of which have been highlighted by the previous speakers. Expertise in civil society differs from that of governments or other types of actors. Spanning across state boundaries, civil society experts can provide a wide variety of technical expertise, capacity building resources, linkages to commercial perspectives, research outcomes, and other important views. The Summit for Space Sustainability that I mentioned earlier was designed in part to provide additional opportunities for engagement across all actors in the space community, and has been carried out in coordination and co-hosted by governments around the world in an acknowledgement of the need to have policy discussions across those actors. So what we would say is that it's critical that we continue to evolve new and improved pathways for contributions to global space. Multilateral institutions can leverage civil society to bring in non-traditional viewpoints and more stakeholders and consider how to engage and receive these inputs effectively, very much in this fashion similar to today. We encourage those working on the Summer of the Future to continue to think about this as an important topic, and we're excited to have this conversation with the others on this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. I think it was a perfect closing remark. It could have been mine for the end of the session with regards to the reminder about the importance of the civil society organizations. So the delay is only my fault because I was jumping in with some remarks in between. So thanks a lot for keeping the time. It was really, really great. We have 25 minutes left, and I would like to focus on two main topics, which I think have emerged from that. And I would lay the topics out there just to give you also the opportunity to prepare your potential answers to that, since we are nine speakers here. So on the one hand side, I would like to touch on a topic which has not really been touched upon from any of the statements, which I think is really pivotal also with regards to the civil society role. Looking from the outside of the topic which we are discussing, it is a topic which might be distant from the public. We have heard Giuseppe reminded the importance of MBA to speak to the public. So civil society organizations can be the pulse, the testing the pulse of the public and really raise awareness on the importance. Mix the topic of outer space with the UN, and we have really a difficult mix in terms of how to communicate the importance of the topics which we are. So the first part I would like to discuss a bit on the roles of the civil society organizations, of how we can take advantage of our topics and our roles as a mediator. Civil societies are a mediator between what's happening at the policy level, what's happening in international multilateral fora, and so on, and translate this to the public and be the ones who are helping us to raise awareness. The Secretary General has said we need to do a global roadshow on the Summit of the Future. The summit itself is a topic which is very difficult to communicate, and then combine this with space, we are in a difficult situation. So that's the first topic I would like to discuss. And the second one, and I invite you just to raise your hands, and I hope I can follow that. And the second topic, just for your preparation, how can we change? How can we really provide a platform for civil society organizations to actively contribute? Krystal mentioned it in the end, that there is an important role of the civil society to contribute to discussions. We see obviously several elements. The space track, the multi-stakeholder space track is one of them, but I think it needs more improved approaches in the future. Scopus has an observer role. It's one of the fastest growing committees within the United Nations at large, including not only member states, but also observer organizations. But what else can be done in this regard? So I open the floor for the first interventions on the role of civil society as being a mediator between the topics discussed and the general public. I saw a hand up, Giuseppe. Do you want to start off?
Yeah, if you like, because I think the tool for doing that, it is given also by the United Nations. So let's take the example of the International Moon Day. The International Moon Day, well, of course, I'm talking about the moon, if you don't mind, for obvious reason. But the International Moon Day, as you know, was proposed by the MVA, but it is a UN event, and the reason why it has been proposed, it is precisely of what you just described. It is a platform to try to bridge basically the position between the space agency, international organization, and the public. And I am pleased to say that in the last two, let's say, years, so to speak, of the International Moon Day, and we have noticed that now we have the link which is connecting the International Moon Day and UNOOSA to the International Moon Day, we have seen a huge interest in developing countries, which I think is something very important. You have about more than 40 to 45. So in a nutshell, the message is we should use the tool that we have in order to bridge the gap with the public, because at the end of the day, it is the public which needs to be convinced of our activity. Thank you.
I cannot agree more with regards to the public needs to be convened about the topics, not only on the space, but also importance looking at the UN at large. I see Brent was the next, and then over to you, Krystal. Brent, over to you.
Yeah, I would just say that I think in all fields, there is a spectrum from professional to public. And so, for example, in the area of policy development, particularly international policy coordination, that is a field. There are people who do it full time. And then there's the public. But in between, there are professionals who work in the fields that are affected by the topics we're talking about. Launch providers, satellite operators, lunar mission teams. And so some of these civil society organizations represented here today comprise those professionals. COSPAR does and AIAA does. What that means is that part of the mediator role that we can play is to help align messaging between policy development through the technical people who do work, not just public on the street and reading articles or, watching news feeds or something, but there are many, many people who work directly in these fields who also need to be aligned. There's messaging that needs to be done there. So COSPAR is a powerful instrument for that. AIAA is as well.
Thank you very much. I think that's an important element with regards to communication. I think that's the importance. We need somebody who's translating the messages which are happening in the UN. Looking from the outside, we are using very difficult language sometimes. Also, the space sector is using difficult language. But the civil society organization have the means to be a translator there as well. So I see Krystal next, then Antonino, and then Nicolas.
Yeah, thank you, Markus. So on the topic of meeting with the public, I think that's a really insightful topic to bring up. I actually partnered with IAF at last year's GLOC, the Global Space Conference on Climate Change, to talk about public impressions of space and a growing concern among some of us that we in the space world tend to assume everyone is very excited about what we do. And to a certain extent, that's true. But if you look at the media, if you look at some of the studies on workforce, if you look at the coverage of certain aspects of space activity in the media, that may not be as true as we think it is. And really helping the public understand the value of space and what their concerns are and what they're consuming, I think is actually huge. I think this is an under-considered topic from that perspective. And I would encourage civil society to continue to bring those views, because we tend to believe that everybody loves what we're doing, and that just isn't necessarily the case anymore. And then that begins to affect workforce. It affects resources. It affects policy ability by policymakers. So I definitely think that that's something that civil society can continue to do. On the topic of how, I want to point out something that's both a challenge and an opportunity. I think part of the problem, like all institutions, is speed. A lot of other actors in the space community move very quickly. And as several of the other speakers have pointed out, that leads to problems in policy when policy is really behind what's actually happening in the rest of the space community. And trying to figure out how we can adjust, not just for the conclusion and participation of civil society and other actors, but also think about where our systems are effective and where they're not. There's been some really great outcomes at the international governance level. My executive director was one of the drivers behind the long-term sustainability guidelines, and we're seeing a lot of interest in that. But we're already getting to the point where there are a lot of other topics to be considering. And so when I think of solutions, I also think about how we're structured and if we're able to respond on a global level in a timely manner that addresses the whole set of space activities across industry, academia, civil society, etc.
Thank you very much. I think you opened a really important topic with regards to communication. That's something which I tend to see since I'm working at the UN, that we need to break down the silos from the UN, but also from the space sector. The space sector tends to speak more inwards rather than outwards, and that's something where I see a great role of the civil society organizations in, as I said, as the mediator and translators. And keep your thought also for the second one with regards to the models. Maybe we'll have a second round as well on the models. Over to you, Antonino, and then Nicolas.
Thank you, Markus. And yes, let's burst the space bubble, right? I think that's one key thing we can agree all upon. I remember we already discussed this topic extensively at the World Space Forum in December. There was a whole day dedicated to communication. And I think, in many other sectors, communication with the general public is done by the media. And I think maybe that's where, we have to do more work in the space sector. We are not really great at engaging with the traditional media. And most of the time when that happens, there is very distorted narratives that have been pushed in several public medias. And so I think we have to do better in telling our story, being more true to our story, and not try to attract this media at any cost, but having more honest collaboration with traditional media. And the second is that the space media cannot be just a media for ourselves, right? Because we have wonderful sources of news in the space sector, but sometimes, again, they're just focused on us as the space community, and they don't go beyond that. So I think, one, we need to engage more with the traditional media because it is their job to communicate to the public, and they know how to do it much better than anyone could. And our own media, we should have it more inclusive, and I think we should support and promote great space media platforms to be more open and to be more far-reaching with the space public. I think that's one key element. The second thing is accessibility. As you already said, and many others have pointed out, space discussions sometimes are seen to be very complex. It's rocket science. It's a famous say to say it's too complicated to talk about. We have to demystify that. And for example, in the 2020, when there was the pandemic and everyone was looking for topics to discuss, Secure World Foundation, Open Lunar, SJC created something called the Moon Dialogues, right? Which was just a series of Zoom meetings that were happening every month, every full moon, to discuss about lunar activities in a very easy, simple, and accessible way. And I can tell you that gathered so much attention from the public, and 3 years later accumulated in a book that I have here on my desk, and that even went to the desk of the King of England, by the way. So, a lot can start with just accessibility, and I think that's another thing that we should tell to ourselves. We have to be more simple, and the role of cross-cutting organizations and collaborations into fostering that, I think it is key. And I will say one final thing, which is in terms of how we bridge together all the different topics of the Summit of the Future, we need to look for the connections. And that's something that, wearing my other hat as co-chair of SGC, we're trying to do, bringing together, for example, space, youth, and future generations. So we have to, again, make that little extra effort in finding the common points and then bringing them together.
Hey, great. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the reminder also on the impact, on the potential impacts, what civil society, how to shift the needle on certain topics, going up to the King of England, as you mentioned. But I think all of the statements before really underlined the importance of the research, of the topics, of the focus, of the awareness raising. So thanks a lot for that. So next one is Nicolas, and then over to you, Hannah.
Yes. So on my side, I think the important keyword is awareness raising. Because if we are talking among ourselves right now, it's good. We can, discuss among ourselves, identify potential issues. But, if you have a hammer, everything you see is a nail. And that's the problem of the space sector. Space, for us, it's a mean to an end. It's an end in itself, while for some others, it's only a mean. So we have to bridge, we have to go beyond the silos and engage with other people. Because also, the stakeholders discussion, we have to see what is the public. It means different things to different people. Is it member states? In COPOS, there are 102 member states involved in COPOS. You have the objective to go to 150 by 2030, which is great. But that means there are still about 40 that's not included into that. But what is important is also to see that, for instance, if you look at the map beyond me, there are parts of the world that are using space, but are not really a spacefaring. You don't need to be a spacefaring country to be involved in the discussion and to have a voice. But I mean also for the younger generation, because we are seeing now a pivotal changes in terms of generation. The millennium, the Gen Z, they have different aspirations. We need to communicate differently with them. Those are the future workforce, the future decision makers, or at least supporting to take the decision to lead to the policies that will be developed in the future. And if we want to talk to those ones, we need also to change the software, how we reach them, but also how we communicate them. And that's very important that we take that into account. So, because in space, it's not only, above the von Karman line, but also it's north, south, east, and west, and we need to be cognizant about that.
Thank you very much. I just would like to highlight that RT, the new director of the Office for Outer Space Affairs, when starting, she made a very strong point that leveraging the member states, but also the public, around the benefits of space, to be able to then converge into a discussion on the space governance issues. Because if we cannot communicate on the importance of space, and here I think the civil society plays a major role, because the UN would always highlight the importance of space governance and the importance of space for the benefits of the implementation of the mandates, but you can really bring it and necessarily translate it. So I think we need to converge around the benefits of space to be able to discuss the difficult topics, something which is one of the top priorities of the new leadership of UNOOSA. Over to you, Hannah, and then over to you, Anil.
Thanks, Markus. Honestly, you just sort of touched on exactly what I was about to say. I think that we essentially have a very long way to go in effectively communicating the key enabling role of space technologies, and it's quite hard to expect constituents to engage in the problem-solving elements of space when they don't have a well-formed understanding of the importance of the technologies themselves. So, it's only when you truly understand what would happen if many of our key satellites did go down that people will begin to care how to prevent that. I think that on a practical standpoint, I think that the Sustainable Development Goals have been a very helpful tool in bridging that understanding. The SDGs have helped, every sector and industry to translate the impact of their respective industries to the global goals, and that's recognizable to most entities. And indeed, it's helpful for everyday people to really understand and localize things to regional priorities and concerns. And I think civil society can particularly draw on the SDGs in terms of identifying, how the bigger picture boils down to a key point of interest to the everyday person. And just one last comment, I think that, in the space community, we're very guilty of using too much outer space imagery. And I think that to a large portion of the outer public, images of satellites and outer space, that doesn't resonate with the everyday person, and it doesn't necessarily communicate the impact that space technologies are having on essential communication technologies, on climate monitoring and mitigation, on food supply, on agriculture. All of these things which we inevitably rely on aren't well communicated by pictures of our satellites. As beautiful as they are, I think we can do a better job in translating it to a very real human visual cue that resonates with the everyday person. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Hannah. I think it's actually exactly going in this direction, where I thought it would be going. The civil society organizations being as the ones testing the pulse of the public and of the society. For me, the key word obviously in civil society is society, and being either an expert, having an expert role and expertise on one hand side, but also being able to be at the forefront in terms of exchanging. Over to you, Anil, and then I would like to hand to start off with the closing round. Anil, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, as all of us know, civil society plays very important role for SDGs, and especially for the sustainability of space. There are many international civilian organizations works like IADC, IAAA, ISO, IAF, IAF Space Traffic Management, and many things. But many things are working in isolation, and many are observers in the UN COPS as well. They come and make statements, but there is no platform to come together and do it. Maybe it is under UNOOSA, it can be done also. And as far as a vice president of IAF, I'm vice president of IAF also, there is IAF has started one SIS agenda, that is a sustainability, investment and security, and Pascale is leading security, I think. Yeah, so like that, there are many corners, the works are going on sustainability and sustainable development goals. We should have a platform to come together and giving awareness to the stakeholders about this. That's what I want to tell. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We just received also a question online, and before we go to the closing round, I think it's an interesting question. Just very quickly, if some of you would like to pick that up, what kind of role for sci-fi shows such as For All Mankind in terms of using fictional alternative timelines are serious tools to explore sociological and geopolitical issues, specifically, obviously, through the space lens. But is there anyone who would like to respond to that very, very, very quickly before we go to the closing round? I think it could be an interesting question. Without going into the details of For All Mankind and realism around that. Over to you, Brent.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, I think we all recognize the benefit of pulling people into our topics through entertainment. It's a two-edged sword because people walk away thinking they understand something. And that can be hazardous, partly by blurring the line between reality and fiction or possibility and reality. But also because we all know that entertainment venues take licenses with fact or with engineering because they have to. That's how they make it entertaining. And that then makes our communication job harder. Two-edged sword.
Very interesting. I think that's a very interesting thought. Nicolas, you would like to also add to that question, or?
Yes, just briefly, because I think it's important to have people having a positive view of the future. It's a Uchronie, the example that is done, so it's an alternative scenario based. But without spoiling everyone, it's more about the people than the tech. And I think that's important because if us in the space sector, yes, we love it to talk about the thrust of a rocket and the velocity or the kinetic impact but the real society, the real people, the 8 billion the rest of the world, they don't care about that. Because they care about people. And we have to also explain that, yes, being an astronaut is pretty cool, but that's the tip of the iceberg. What matters is what below the surface. All these people enabling astronauts to fly. And I think that's what's really important. Because if we keep saying space is hard, it's not hard. But then we are alienating a big part of the society and they will think we are elitist. And that's the wrong stuff. When you look at right now what's going on around the world, people, they don't trust into that kind of thing. They don't trust about climate change. So we have to talk differently to the people, but we have to show we are human, and we talk to other humans. We are not interacting with machines. And I think we need to change how we talked, and also, especially the younger generation. Disinformation is going to be a big issue for the future.
Thank you very much. I think Antonino, you also raised the hand on that. So there's I think two competing sides of the coin here. There's one that publicity can be detrimental to the effects which you want to have, but the other one is there's no bad publicity with regards to that approach, or any publicity is good publicity. So maybe Antonino, quickly for closing that off. If you have to disconnect any of the speakers, please feel free to do so. I would like to really dive very shortly in the closing remarks on how we can move forward. But I would like to give quickly the floor to Antonino to respond also to that question, and then we go on with the closing round. Over to you, Antonino.
Thanks, Markus. And just anecdotically, I agree actually what Brent said on the double-edged sword. I don't know if any of you have seen Space Force, but at some point during the show, there is someone that says that they want to consult a space lawyer, and all the others react, there is no such thing, it's a scam, and then everybody laughs, right? So as a space lawyer, I felt particularly touched by that joke. And, people can come out by saying, is there really a space lawyer? Or by is it really a scam, And so again, then I think it's up to us to follow up on these things and use them towards the right direction, because otherwise, you always leave it for interpretation, and I don't know if I'm happy about that.
Thanks a lot for that. Two quick notions on that. I didn't want to bring up the Space Force. I was impressed that this was seen very positively. That the show was seen very positively also within the US system. I heard during a visit last year. And also, the Office for Outer Space Affairs was mentioned in the Big Bang Theory, also not very positively. So, but this gave us the opportunity as the Office for Outer Space Affairs to exactly reply in social media to say what we actually do. And I think that's an entry point for us. Obviously, it's very tricky to combat that. So, thanks a lot for the question from online. So, wrapping it up a bit and maybe going towards the how really civil society organization can effectively collaborate in this environment, maybe going more into that direction. I don't want to ask you now because many of you have already raised the topics and the important issues at hand for the Summit of the Future. And from your specific lens, I think we have great examples of what should be addressed and should be discussed. But now I would like to move more into the how civil society can engage. Are there existing models for such collaboration? We have seen the high-level board on effective multilateralism. They have issued a paper. I think it was 2 years ago, referencing the importance of a broader multi-stakeholder engagement within space governance issues, specifically on that topic. They have referenced the ARIA formula as one of the formulas where civil society organizations or expert organizations can contribute to the policy and governance making. So maybe as a quick closing round on this topic, over to you, Pascale.
Yes, thank you. So I want to say that I really resonate what Krystal said, the dizziness of having so many organizations, having no holistic view. So you have really to pick out what works. And I just want to say something about the development and implementation. As a prime example from COSPAR, we have this collaborative effort with the COSPAR panel on planetary protection. And this panel really orchestrates a collective approach by bringing together space agency representatives, leading scientists, members from the and COPOS, and actually some of the meetings are open so everybody can come, and it sets forth policies with detailed standards aimed at safeguarding celestial bodies from the adverse effects of biological contamination. So that's one very specific topic, and it is really proactive, this panel, in creating a global platform for sharing insights on adhering to these policies and planetary protection standards, which are here since 60 years. And I think it can work in the smaller, more focused topics. And we have, for instance, this year also with UN and a lot of scientists, the Planetary Protection Week in London in April 2024 for the first time, in order really to have this engagement of many civil society organizations. So there is a possibility with a focus topic, and but you have to have really the good actors, because I think it's very, very important and crucial that the foundations of policies is the latest peer-reviewed scientific knowledge. And I think this is something I think we have really to look at much stronger, because we want to go in the future and we have to update those policies with all the knowledge which we actually get in the next year. Space is advancing very fast, so is our knowledge with every kind of space mission. And so this is, I wanted to say, one of the examples, I think, where you can really make a model, you know, for working together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any hand up, but I think it's a really good reminder. And looking from the outside, I always see it as a bit of a funneled approach when coming to policy and decision making within large organizations and large processes. So there is obviously the starting point, and it goes upwards for the decision making. But I think adding the layer of civil society, as you said, with regards to the focused approach and really the focused expertise, and spreading out the approaches to various actors and then building it up constantly, that's really important. So thanks a lot for that. And I see Antonino has raised and lowered the hand. You wanna quickly jump in, and then over to you, Krystal?
I'm happy to go after Krystal. I already spoke after the second question, so no problem.
Perfect. Over to you, Krystal.
All right. So for specific suggestions and listening to a lot of great interventions, I would say a couple of things. One is how multilateral governance organizations or similar type groups can communicate outwards. So COPUS is a pretty closed off world if you haven't already been on a delegation or don't have a way to go. It just is an example, and it's just an example. But there's this inability. Like, I promise you that there are consultants out there somewhere selling like detailed descriptions of what happens in that room, or like Secure World's thought about putting this out as just like hey, this is a summary of the last 2 weeks, because not everybody can attend and listen to everything, and also just the structures and how they function. That's why we put out, for instance, our Copious briefing book to give both new members to Copious, but also the outside community a better understanding of how it was structured. And I think this applies to a lot of organizations. So really thinking about how the UN system and other systems can communicate outwards to other communities about who they are, what they do. And so that I wouldn't just apply that to the public, I would apply it actually much more importantly to our own community. The reverse, when civil society is thinking about how it can give inputs, obviously through its national governments. But the beauty of civil society is that, as I said earlier, it spans borders. And so really trying to think about what those different inputs can be. And it's going to vary depending on a particular institution, opening it up for a more broad observer status, providing opportunities to submit written statements, but also thinking about how you can have forums like this and a variety of conversations and actually get people together. Because again, I do think a part of the problem is we're all very focused on what we're doing, understandably, and we're all very busy, but we miss the opportunity to hear from people that we don't seek out. The number of times that people, oh, that's a military panel, I don't need to go listen to that. But you do, because what's happening in military space around the world is relevant to what's happening in commercial and civil space, et cetera. So how can we as civil society and vice versa participate in more forums, not that we all have a lot of time? The last thing I would say is continue to think about our ideas of whose voice we're hearing. This is a great panel. I was really honored to be here. I know most of you. And so trying to think about how we can hear from developing nations, indigenous voices, groups that are just starting to figure out how space applies to them, and really just continuing to broaden that. I think we've already made a lot of great steps in the last few years, but I would encourage us as a community to continue to think about who we even think of as a stakeholder and bringing them to the table and listening to their voices as well. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So thanks for the reminder to not only burst the space bubble, but also burst the civil society bubble in the space bubble. So I think it's an important reminder to all of us, obviously for us as the Office for the Space Affairs and the conveners of such meetings, to be looking broadly and also bringing in outside voices, not necessarily from the space, but also somebody who's using space technology, downstream applications. We had a great panel on the youth, for the youth before, where we heard somebody from the technology side, from the educational side, from other parts. So I think that's a good reminder. Thanks a lot for that. Over to you, Antonino, and I don't see any other hand up afterwards.
Thank you, Markus, and I'm very glad I went after Krystal, because she gave a perfect introduction to a few of the things that I wanted to develop and raise a few important points. As we already discussed, I think the accessibility here is the key, right? So the UN system doesn't really seem too accessible to many civil society organizations. In order to have meaningful engagement, you need to have a lot of expertise. You need to have someone that really knows the system inside out, or huge support from a delegation. And I think there is a lot of work that could be done in the UN system to improve that. And I would say that events such as the World Space Forum that we've both been attending recently in December have been really helpful for that. I think that the last day where we had a sort of simulated Copious environment with member states taking the floor and speaking really gave a reality check to all the public that was there about how this really works, right? And I think it was also refreshing in that session to have other people taking the floor and speaking more liberally. So I think those kind of more informal but still realistic type of events like World Space Forum are really great, and they really provide an opportunity for a first step, because if you bring a civil society organization directly to Copious, they probably won't understand what is going on, because it's a whole world of its own, and that makes sense. But at the same time, you need maybe an intermediate level of engagement. And then for those who are really ready to engage at a more higher and detailed level, the ARIA formula, I think it's a great example. That could be done. I don't know if it can really work in the context of Copious, for example, because it was developed for the Security Council. It's about 15 countries. When you have 102, it's more difficult to arrange. But something definitely to be kept in mind. And then the third part is really about again, creating those spaces for organization to talk to each other. And so I mentioned before the Moon Dialogues, which was a coalition between like Secure World Foundation, FGC, Open Lunar, the MIT, and a few others. And really like having those groups that doesn't have to be formal, don't have to be like alliances, but are more like places where organizations talk to each other and try to synergize. I think those are very important, and we need to take an effort to make them happen. And finally, on the inclusivity of these discussions, I was about to point the same thing. We need to be able to bring in minorities into this discussion. But, and I've been trying to do that last year with the Lunar Policy Priorities Report, sometimes these actors don't have knowledge to bring because they feel very intimidated by the complexity of the topic. And so civil society has a responsibility to do capacity building. We need to bring education and knowledge to these actors so that they don't feel intimidated and that they feel that they can express an informed position, because that is really the highest barrier to entry that you can imagine. And most of them are not really aware that we're even discussing these topics. And so there we need to do awareness raising and capacity building so that we can have a truly inclusive discussion. And I think all of our organizations are already doing that. It's just, again, about strategizing it and making it happening in a more intentional way.
Thank you very much, Antonino. Thanks a lot. I think it's a good reminder, and some of you are doing great work in terms of capacity building, but also doing capacity building for other civil society organizations. I think is a good recommendation, which coming out of here. There is efforts within the UN to be as broad as possible for civil society organizations, but I understand that from the outside, it is looking very difficult how to approach, how to get there, and it's a maze to navigate. Even from the inside, sometimes it's very difficult to navigate that system. So I don't see any other hand up other than Hannes, and I think given that it's very early for her, I think it's perfect. If everybody agrees, we can give her the closing remarks, and I would like to summarize then a bit what we have discussed here. Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Markus. And yeah, I'll try to be as articulate as possible at this time, but I just wanted to absolutely echo the comments of Antonino and Krystal regarding the accessibility of the UN forums and the importance of inclusive and diverse representation. And I believe that given the undisputed importance of executive governance and the fact that member states and the UN, you have that convening power. So understanding how to integrate the stakeholders into those existing fora, that is sort of, best case scenario. But indeed, we've already outlined how, the ongoing importance of civil society organizations working together to avoid duplication of effort and to increase the common understandings between us. And I think, one thing that we can remember as a space community is that space is incredibly difficult, but we're also not the only sector that is dealing with complex global issues, and we can look to other sectors for really effective modeling. And I think a really interesting parallel is, for example, the Global Alliance on the Future of Food, and that's really looking at food security at an international level. And what that is doing is bringing together all of the civil society organizations across the world to share information, to strengthen evidence and research, conventions for collaboration. They really look at action. They look at funding networks. And this is something that we at the Karman Project have been exploring, is whether we can sort of pave the way for some type of alliance for civil society organizations working within space so that we can more effectively communicate with one another, more effectively share information, and also more effectively support one another's initiatives, which ultimately then feed into those top level fora that are being convened at the United Nations level. So yeah, we need to also continuously be looking outward for other modelling that has been tried and tested in an effective manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Thanks a lot for I think, very important closing remarks with regards to looking beyond their own horizon. And we discussed it quite a few times now, that it's important to break down the silos. We have heard it in the World Space Forum. We have now heard it today. I think from overall, with regards to the intention, and going back to the beginning of when I did the summary of where we started, and just as a reminder, it was outer space in 12 commitments being discussed and negotiated by member states. Outer space was one small element, and we have really come a far way until today, thanks to the vision of the Secretary General to make a multi-stakeholder dialogue around outer space issues. And I think that's really important. Really important to acknowledge. Nevertheless, only acknowledging is only half the way. We need to keep on moving forward towards the summit of the future. And then I invite you all to already consider the way afterwards in terms of we work towards a pact for the future. We work towards elements. We have heard it. Hannah has outlined it just right now. There's multiple other topics to be discussed in the Summit of the Future. It ranges from international financial architecture, new agenda for peace, future generations, youth. We have emergency platforms. So really a broad set of topics being discussed there, and outer space is there. Obviously, we as the space community see it as a win that space is referenced in such a document. But obviously, we also need to take forward the momentum and see how we can take that forward after the Summit of the Future. So thanks a lot for everybody for joining the civil society panel. I think it was really an engaging discussion. I learned a lot. It was great to have such a distinguished representatives of panels. I heard the reminder that we should be also inviting other civil society organizations, and we'll do our best to also help to convene different parties in the future. And that's a clear recommendation I'll take away. From your expertise level, you have all brought very specific recommendations. I think there's no need to remind that we are talking on space traffic management, space debris, and space resources. But obviously here we switched a bit the table on who are the actors, and I think that was great. And I thank you for your contribution. Before having the honor to close the entire preparatory symposium for the in-person meeting, which is happening 14 to 15 in May in Portugal, to which I invite you all considering joining us. We will open the registration for the public and the general public during the next week. So please start looking for the registration portal. We look forward for hosting member states, and you will see the program being uploaded to the conference website either in the course of today or the beginning of next week. So I invite you all to reach out to us if you want to join, to contribute, to actively participate. And I've been asked to summarize a bit the main key takeaways, not only from today, but also from the technical symposium, but also from the policy symposium. And for us, obviously, there have been some key topics and some key elements emerged throughout the discussions. So breaking it up along the different topics to be discussed. So space traffic management, we heard the call throughout the entire week, develop a global and adopt global standards for space object tracking, data sharing, all of these topics around the technical issues. Interoperability, I think that's something which is really key. It is a reminder which we hear in almost any for interoperability, exchange of information, and being open and transparent with data. This links back obviously to long-term sustainability guidelines, guideline B, which is a reminder that there's an importance of sharing of data. So that's from the space traffic management angle. Space debris mitigation, establish more norms and principles for active space debris removal and in-orbit servicing. That was very clear in not only in the policy forum but also in the technical part. And then more from the technical symposium, which happened last year, improve the models and techniques of space debris characterization and evolution for guide debris mitigation strategic effectively. So something more coming from the technical community. And then on sustainable space resource activities, develop a regulatory framework for exploration. Here we see a lot of things happening within the committee, and in all of these topics, I don't need to send a reminder. In all of these topics, the Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space is very active within the working groups, but also in the committee itself. So that was a reminder, and then. I don't want to go into the detail of data sharing, but one thing which is a recurring effort, it's not only on the civil society environment, it's in each of these topics, it is foster international collaboration, bringing the different actors, provide a platform not only for the civil society organizations, but also see opportunities for collaboration of various actors overall. And one thing which emerged from the technical part is obviously invest in technology and innovation for sustainability. So encourage investment in technology that advance space sustainability. That's something which emerged from that part. And last but not least, where I think not not only this group has a huge role to play, but obviously our role as the Office for Outer Space Affairs is important. Enhance capacity building and global awareness. That's something which we all should be taking home. Be ambassadors, not only on the importance for space itself, but also on the governance mechanism. I think we are at the time where the international community, including not only through the multilateral processes, can prove that we can be ahead of the curve. We have heard a reminder from Giuseppe that we might be a bit too late, but we had heard for Leo that we might be a bit too late, but we can be ahead of the curve for the moon. It was really a reminder that the international system can prove its answering capabilities. So just as a reminder that COPUS was founded as an ad hoc committee to the reply of the launch of the first satellite. Now we are so many years later, and we can again prove as an international community that we can be ahead of the curve of questions for the future. In the end, we are trying to solve and find answers to the questions to secure space for future generations, and that's, I think, is something which is close to all of our hearts, no matter where we are coming from to address this topic. With that, I would like to say a sincere gratitude and thank you to the Portuguese Space Agency. Thank you for hosting a wonderful virtual event throughout the entire week. Thanks for everybody who has a lot of hands in the background. You all know how much work it is to make that happen, from a technical standpoint of view, from the content standpoint of view, and from how to make that happening. So thank you very much who everybody who's helping us to get this rolling. This is to say this was merely the preparatory events. So just as a quick reminder, we hope to see you all in person in Portugal, 14 and 15 of May. Check out the website, register, and we are looking forward to coming together in person then. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. I won't start saying names because I fear that I will forget somebody. But I really thank everybody, not only on this panel, but also everybody who was helping us and putting this together. I see Hugo has opened his camera, which I think is a sign for me to hand over to him. Hugo. It's not a sign. So he says, it's perfectly fine. My closing remarks are the closing remarks. So thank you very much, everybody, and thanks a lot, and hope to see you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.